Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. I'm Adam Piercy, here with my co-host Mick Mulroy. Today, we are going to talk about relationships. And specifically, I think maybe there will be personal stories from the two of us today, but definitely we'll be talking about Stoicism's view on relationships. There's definitely some historic context here. I think this is one that Mick and I have been kind of talking about for a little while because I think I wasn't really ready to have this conversation in this podcast context until now, but we'll see where we get to today. So, Mick, do you have any opening thoughts before we start getting into it?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to talk about relationships, probably to include, romantic and those type of relationships. But to start with, the way Stoicism is viewed sometimes as a very singular, emotion controlling philosophy, where you're like the tower of individuality and self reliance, which I don't think is a bad thing. Um, but I think those that don't really understand Stoicism thinks it's kind of isolationist, and I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean that in like personal sense, and it's really
Yeah.
far from the truth. Like it's really actually the opposite,
Yeah.
in my view. Yes, it starts with yourself, kind of like Buddhism. I think I'm not an expert in Buddhism, but
Mm-hmm. Totally,
certainly,
though.
it really it's kind of like get yourself in order before you can really be of value to a friend group, a family group, or a society. So it
Yeah.
kind of starts that way, but the purpose is so that we'll have a better friend group, family, society, right? Because if everybody focuses on themselves to get themselves in order to, obviously abide by the virtues, to focus on things in life that you can control, not constantly complain about things you can't control, to have a belief that, um, you know, it's not how much you have, it's how good you are kind of concept. You're
Right.
just going to be better in one-on-one relationships, whether it's with your parents, siblings, friends,
Yeah.
girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, inside your own family, inside your neighborhood, town. I mean, you get my point, right? So it's actually
Yeah.
the opposite. And you can see quotes from the famous, pillars of Stoicism from Zeno to, the modern ones that emphasize that. And that's why it's so utilized inside the team scenario. That's why
Yeah.
so many military units use it. That's why so many resiliency coaches, whether they're, you know, actual therapy or just coaches in athletics, in sports, team sports, etc. So I'd start with that,
Yeah.
kind of dissing the false implications that Stoicism is about. Some guy who's super tough, sitting on top of a mountain by himself. Not that you
Yeah.
can't do that, but that's not, you know. And I'll start with one quote because I always look for quotes during my
Yeah.
week. Uh, we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another is contrary to nature. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 2.1. So that's where I'd start with. And it's
Yeah.
important, I think, for people to have that grounding sense of self, understand who they are before they can really be of value to other people. And I think that is actually our purpose in life, is to be of value to other people and broadly the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really agree with that because when you look back, right, if you think about it, so Stoicism starts and, um, there's, excuse me, there's essentially three types of philosophy, branches to every philosophy that you have, right? You have logos, you have physics, and you have ethos, right? And in the Stoicism world, like so many times over, it's like the only important one is ethics, which is essentially who you are and how you act, right? And that I feel like that inherently starts with a social aspect, which includes the interactions with others, right? And when you look at the four virtues of Stoicism, right, which are paralleled in other places as well, right? Um, you know, Justice is specifically the social virtue. It's the treatment of others with benevolence, with magnanimity. And so, it's core to our values that we are a social philosophy, right? And
Mhm.
interestingly, I was doing some research for this, and I was looking at, and I have books today to actually show to the video. Um, William B. Irvin's A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy is its subtitle. In Irvin's book, it actually talks about essentially a comparison between uh, Epicureanism and cynicism and Stoicism, right? And so I'll quote this, right? And this is from page 140 from this copy that I have, where it says, Epicurus may have been the philosophical rival of the Stoics, but he shared their misgivings about sex. Sexual intercourse has never done a man good, and he is lucky if it has not harmed him. But having said all this, I should add that despite their misgivings about sex, the Stoics were big advocates of marriage. A wise man, Musonius says, will marry, and having married, he and his wife will work hard to keep each other happy. Indeed, in a good marriage, two people will join in a loving union and will try to outdo each other in the care they show for each other. Such a marriage, one imagines, will be very happy. So, I don't think Stoics would say you have to get married. I also think they don't say don't get married, don't go near other people. I think they do advocate, though, for this social aspect, which many times over, grows into these, lifelong relationships that we have and see. And you see that, and I'll do one of my other books quickly. For example, there's a book by Armand called Socrates in Love, which talks about Socrates and his life, but it also discusses three of the big loves of his life: Myrto, his first wife; Xanthippe, who is his second wife, who he meets
She
when he's like
had
50.
water on his head all the time. Which one was
Yeah, she was a firecracker. She would like they would like argue in the street. It sounds like a very colorful marriage. And then he meets someone later in his life called Aspasia, who has been, I think, unfairly called a courtesan, even though she was clearly in the aristocracy. So she was probably just that she was an educated single woman.
it?
But we have our progenitor, we have the Stoics themselves talking about these relationships, and we're going to talk about other stuff than just marriage, probably. But ultimately, I think this is something where key Stoics they're all married and they all have relationships, and they talk about how to interact with people. But those relationships, I think are fundamentally within the core of the philosophy. We're not monks. We just aren't. Like there's no Stoic that I have seen who advocates to live in a whole or to live on your own and ignore other people. I don't think that really happens.
I always viewed the Stoic version of not version take on marriage um, as a promotion of marriage as the foundation of society, but the sexual part being more of a counterpoint to the theory at the time, like the Epicureans, the like if it feels good, do it, kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
have orgies or whatever. I'm not a prude.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for one or the other, but
Yeah.
I view it less as like Stoics think you should only have like sex to have babies kind of thing. I've never had, I was a kid when I was learning this early, so I didn't really care. But
Right.
that that I think it is kind of a counterpoint to the other side of the philosophy that existed at the time, which was eat as much as you want, drink as much as you want, have sex all the time, because life's fleeting and it only pleasure is the only thing that matters.
Right. Right.
Well, that I mean, we know what happens to society if that's the case. Like it goes nowhere. Like we're not shooting four people around the moon if all we're worried about is eating, drinking, and you know. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
No, for sure. And I think the
I
carpe
think they
diem.
do promote the idea of marriage. I've always viewed the early Stoics
Yeah.
as like that is what underpins society, not from a religious point of view, but from like just human
Yeah. No,
raising
for
kids.
sure. And I think there's a side of that which is which is partly, I think, tied in with the virtues anyways, right? To have the courage to stand up and choose somebody, to have the will to act in support of someone, to have the wisdom to see someone seeing you for who you are and making that choice of you as well. I think these are all things that if they're not directly in there, they're paralleled or revolving around it in a way that is deeply, tied to the philosophy and deeply relative to the philosophy. So, and I mean, look, Marcus, right? Marcus gets married. He's with his wife for 35 years before her death, and at the same time, um, their marriage wasn't perfect. In fact, and it's actually, I should say, Donald Robertson, friend of the podcast, he has a graphic novel called Verissimus, which is actually
Yep.
one of the few that actually does have clear highlights of what he interprets their relationship to be like, which I thought was quite interesting. It's too big to get out, and also it's kind of graphic, so I'm not going to put it on camera, but I highly recommend that graphic novel as well. But the interesting thing is, like, 35 years together, they went through essentially near the end of their marriage, just before Faustina died, they went through a huge scandal where she was accused of having an affair with Avidius Cassius, who had tried to take the emperorship from Marcus while he was in the eastern regions of the empire. And they still made it through that. And I think that's one of those things as well where, you know, after she died, Marcus deified her, and that would be normal anyways, but like deified her, and the chronicles of that time period show that he did not deify her just because, like, it was definitely true feelings between the two of them. And I think, this is one of those things to take into account, is I think a Stoic, when they look at this, right, and they talk carpe diem or they talk memento mori or whatever, the thing is that those things are not meant to be nihilistic. In fact, it's supposed to be the flip side. It's supposed to be where you cherish these moments with these people, you cherish these moments that you have. And I think it's one of those things that's commonly misunderstood, that we're nihilistic, and we're not nihilistic. In fact, we're sort of the opposite. It's like, Marcus lost more than half his children in his life, and those relationships could have scarred him in a way that made him nihilistic. And instead, he would remind himself to remember, like, you may not wake up tomorrow, so I will take into account that today is precious, right? And I think that's a key thing that Stoics take into their relationships. I know in my own most recent relationship, there was times where, you know, you have to, like, when it ended, you have to remember all these things that have happened, and you remember that the girls don't like thunderstorms, or this is, make sure that you check on them if this happens or whatever. But the thing is doing that, I took that from a Stoicism perspective to remind myself every morning to be thankful for them to be in my life. And that was I don't know anybody else who has ever really done that I've ever talked to about something like this, but it was something that was very important to me, and it felt like it resonated with Marcus, because Marcus would say, he's like, you may be gone tomorrow, so I will remember you today. And I think Stoics choose to do that. I think they choose to take their relationships seriously, even if they're not romantic, even if they're not familial, even
Of
if they're
course.
friendship based.
Yeah. And so to look at all relationships, because sometimes we overly focus on the romantic ones, right?
Sure.
I always wondered why, if you look at movies, like 90% of them are about romantic relationships, and nothing wrong with
Yeah.
romantic relationships, but there's so much more to human, you know, experience than just a rom com, right?
Yeah.
Like, why not have more about friends just being friends,
Yeah.
So, full disclosure, when it comes to romantic stuff, like, I've been married 32 years, and I couldn't tell you anybody how to date, right? I'm so outdated for that. Like, I wouldn't even know. I've only had like three girlfriends in my
you're
life.
you're
So,
you're getting close to Marcus and Faustina, though, so way to go.
yeah, right.
3 more years, eh?
So, some thoughts on what I've seen or experienced, either did right or wrong, that I
Yeah.
think are helpful in life as somebody who's just older, not smarter. Uh, First of all, I think every relationship should start with a friendship. What I mean by that is, like, the core of all solid relationships that I've seen in my own life and with other people is friendship, and that means, like, mutual respect, Like you've decided that you are each other's people. And what I mean by that, like you've like, I'm going to look out for this person. I know this person's going to look out for me.
Yeah.
I want to help them. It's a mutual thing of respect, admiration, and like just and you can't give a crap about everybody, right? So like on social media, you got a million friends or whatever. That's not friends. Like people that you actually care about and spend time with, and that should be. It could be people your age. It could be people not your age. It could be people you're related to. And I know it's changed a lot since in the old days, most people were very close to their biologically related families. It's just not the case anymore. They move.
Right.
They it's just not, it's nobody's fault. But then they've kind of created their own family groups. And I'm not saying that's wrong at all. I'm just saying that it should start with that. And if a romantic relationship grows out of that, that's going to be the most solid one in existence. If it's just based
Yeah.
on attraction, or you hit the point in your life where you want to have children, so you just find somebody, like uh, it's just not gonna. I mean, it might work. I don't know, right? But I think the ones I've seen that are most solid start with a foundation of friendship, and
Yeah.
friendship is a two-way street. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm somewhat of an introvert. It's harder for introverts to do it as easily as extroverts, where you feel like you got to be a part of your friend's life. You got to give a crap. You got to be the guy that doesn't always have to be invited out. Sometimes you should invite
Yeah.
them out. You should text them and say, "What's up?" Right? Again, introverts are not more inclined to do it, but they can't. You can't use it as an excuse. You can't use it as an excuse, and I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Yet, so I'm saying it. Um, but I think you have to take the time and effort to be a friend if you want to have friends. And if you don't want to have friends, your relationships, which are a key part of human existence, are going to suffer. They just are.
Yeah.
And so when you get to the romantic, and I have an odd quote here: friendships always benefit, love sometimes injures. Seneca, Letters 35. And I think what he's talking about there is you can fall in love, or what some people would call be infatuated, which is not always lasting. But if you're not at the core of the relationship a friend of the person, you're going to struggle. So
Yeah.
what I'm advocating for, maybe it's old fashioned, is have a time to learn and meet people before you venture down the road of romantic relationships. Because if you're not what people would call compatible, which is, I'm just saying, friends,
Yeah.
you're gonna have problems, I think. And
Yeah.
it's not only good for your existence, it's also not good for the other person's existence. And if you should bring children into it, then it just compounds it. So it may be a
Yeah.
simplistic way of advocating for people to develop their own relationships, but I don't think people are doing it. I think people, and now you look at the trends today, kids, and I've talked to friends who are my age who have kids, and they're really worried because their kids don't have any romantic relationships. They
Right.
just don't. They've just decided,
Right.
yeah, I'm friends with them. I'm just going to go do whatever, play Xbox. Um, they're not intermingling. They're not going to parties. They don't drink, which you could say, well, isn't
Right.
that a good thing? Well, I mean, I don't think one should drink to excess. But the problem that a lot of experts are saying is they're not drinking because they're not going to parties. They're not
Yeah.
actually socially interacting, and that's a
Yeah.
problem. Not
I
drinking.
heard a,
Yeah,
I
it's
heard a piece
causing.
of data recently from someone on the Bill Maher podcast. It's a really good time for me to say this because I didn't think about it before. And it was a doctor on the Bill Maher show, Real Time, where he said, right now, young people, like 70% of their meals are had by themselves. So there's
Yeah,
no social interaction with that. And this ties into what you're saying. Sorry, I know I interrupted you. I apologize. But it was just
well,
like,
that's a good point. It's a
it
really
was
good.
an interesting point. I didn't know this. And we talked about this a little bit. I can't remember how we got onto isolation. It was a few podcast episodes ago. But I think it is one of those things right now where people are just isolated. It's like 70%. That's not even half. That's more than 2/3, right? You kind of go, wow. And so I think it's 70%. I might be wrong on that number, but I know that it's a huge number like that. My 70 is how my mind is remembering it. But having 70% of your meals by yourself, I mean, that's a lot. The lack of social interaction is really
Yeah.
important, right?
So on that point, and I see this with some older generations. I run every day. It's just what I do, usually solo. So kind of
Yeah.
not doing what I'm saying. But when I start running, when I go out of town and I try to get the same route, right? So I don't have to, figure out where I am all the time.
Yeah.
Inevitably, I start seeing groups of old people that meet at the same time and walk together. I
Right.
see it here in my town. When I go out of town for business, I see it there, but they're always older.
Right.
Usually, I'm not saying this is generalization. It's obviously
Well,
it's not the rule. I also see when we do business lunches and stuff downtown, here in Whitefish. So we're there for business, but I also when we go at this regular time because it's easier to schedule. I see the
yeah.
old now that I got it. They have more time on their hands, but I see the older crowd that meets there for lunch every Tuesday. I don't
Yeah.
see that a lot with younger people. It's a shift. Like there used to be a time when people felt that engaging with their neighbors was just what you did. You had block parties. You went hiking together every Friday. You ate breakfast at the
Yeah.
local diner. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I
how
do.
the younger people, I don't see it. I don't see
I
it.
know.
They tend to be isolated, and it's unhealthy. So if we're talking about one aspect of our relationship discussions for Stoics, and we overuse the quote, but it's a good quote. I mean, what's good for the hive is good for the bee. And if
Yeah.
you can't be humans are part of a hive. We just are, even if you don't want to be. That's the
Right.
way we evolved. That's the way we will, basically persevere and succeed. Even if you're an introvert like me, you don't have to have a gazillion friends, but it's
Yeah.
better for you if you have some real ones that you
Yeah.
care about, not just, what do they do for me kind of thing, but what do you do for them? And I
Yeah.
think that's before you even move into a romantic relationship. If you don't have that down,
Yeah.
I don't think you're ready.
Yeah, and I tend to get grouped myself into a newer term that people use, which is an ambivert, which I'm sort of 50-50. It depends on the day. What it really is the easiest way to describe it is my social battery can get depleted pretty quickly, but I tend to come off like an extrovert because I get excited about stuff. But I think you're right. Like the interconnectedness of people is something that we may be missing nowadays, and in relationships, I think you know, from the friendship perspective, I mean, Stoics very clearly think that is also an important part of this. I think the way I generally think about it is like all emotions, right? Of the entire gamut of emotions is meant to be the human experience. And so romance is great.
Hmm.
And look, I love a good love story. I think, I would say that. But at the same time, I think a lot of people, they think that that's kind of the be all and end all. I'm not going to fault someone for having kids. I'm not going to fault someone for getting married and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that there is there is definitely people within my generation, like I have friends where it's like they had a kid and then basically they disappear, you never see them again, then you realize they don't go outside, and you're kind of like, wow, have you guys done anything recently? And they're like, not really, we're watching, I don't know, some show on whatever. And I'm like, I don't know that you I feel like you're not getting the whole range, right? So I'll quickly use a funny example, which is I have a lot of friends that I've never met before in person, one of whom is Mick.
That's
I
a
would
new,
consider Mick a close friend,
yeah.
but what's funny is we've never even been in the same um like
Country.
province or state. We've only ever been in the same time zone, and that's sort of an odd thing to say, but it's true. I'm not really bothered by that. It's just that it's one of those things where um, I have prioritized the friendship with Mick because, well, what happened? The true story is we did a podcast together because we were introduced through Donald Robertson, and we did a podcast episode on my old podcast for Modern Stoicism, and the the comments were like, these guys are great together, they should do an episode every week. Like, it was really funny. There were all these comments, and then we started chatting more, and it kind of went from there. But we are friends, and my life is more, the way I see it is my life is more faceted and deeper because I have friends like Mick, but I have had relationships with people romantically, but I have family connections as well as I have colleague connections. And having that variety, I think, is part of the human experience, right? Is those different depths, and those different things that let you talk about stuff. Like in many ways, a friend might tell you something that your partner might not want to, or
Yep.
vice versa, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And your
and I
friend,
think
is there when other people aren't. That's part of being a friend.
yeah, because in some ways, friends. What I think is great about friends, and I think, there are historic friendships that we can talk about, right? Like, um, uh, Marcus had a friend. I can't remember if it was Musonius or Galen, but his friend died, and Marcus was apparently like depressed and in bed for like 3 days. And
Mhm.
I think it was Galen. It might have been Musonius, but let's say it was Galen, and then Musonius or this other person writes like, just let him be, because everybody falters and everybody has these rough periods, and you know. And the thing is like, so I think historically, like Stoics are known for their friendships in many ways, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's just those different layers and depth, right? Like a romantic relationship has different parts to it as a friend, like I can't remember what the right word is, not filial, but like a platonic, that's the word. A platonic relationship has something different as a familial relationship, as colleagues or um, professional relationships. And I think that's really important. I recently had someone who used to work for me. She was a student, and she's asked me to be her mentor. Not that I think I can help anybody with anything, but she's asked me to be her mentor. And I basically I was very taken aback by that. But it's just one of those things where it's like, we just always were able to talk about our career stuff in a way that she couldn't get from other people. And the best way to round out your own facets is to have different points of view. So
Yeah.
that's my
So, I
long-winded
mean,
way
if
of
I
saying
was
I
to
agree with
take,
Mick.
see, if I was to, do the dad thing and kind of give bullets, at least that's how my view of dads do things. Um, in addition to like start every relationship looking at it as a friend, like build that foundation. That's going to be the one that endures. Um, make sure that you're actually a friend and not just looking for people to be your friend. In other words, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I'd also say that you're gonna. I mean, I think it's safe to say it's fair to make friends than it is to find romantic relationships, right? Those are a little more rare. But what I would say is two things on romantic relationships. Obviously, I already said the friend part, but if it's not working, don't force it because generally it's not going to work. And it's better for you and the other person to figure out that
Right.
early and then look at, because there's other people out there. I mean, I do kind of romantically believe in like everybody has a person, but if that isn't the person, then you're actually missing the opportunity to find that person. You know what I mean? Because that's not the
Yeah.
person. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Um,
I do.
yeah. So, and then the other part is it's not either or, man. The healthiest people that I know are like they have great relationship with their wives. I'm talking from the male point of view. They do stuff together, just them. They have hobbies together. But that guy also goes fishing with his buddies. This is my world, so you can
Yeah.
put it in your own world. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
or
No,
goes
I
on a
totally.
hunting with his buddies, and
Yeah.
just be his buddy for a while, and your spouse, and the other way around. Like girls do what girls do, and they should be able to do it by themselves. It's not like, oh, you got to spend 100% of your time with me now that we're married or what have you. I think
Yeah.
there's a balance, man, and I think the older people know it. They
Yeah.
just did it. And now it's like you said, I have kids now. I never seen them again. They're like they disappeared. They never do anything.
Yeah.
That's not how to live your life. Not that I'm the guy that should tell everybody how to live their life. I'm just looking at what I've seen, observed other people that I think are better at their relationships. Is there's a balance. It's based on friendships. There's a balance, and they don't. The other thing is, man, you got to get over it when, especially in boy girl relationships. Um, things happen, you get mad, they say something, you say something in life, man. It's like you can't control the past. So if you want to tie it to Stoicism, you cannot control what already happened. You can apologize for it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right.
But if it keeps coming back to the same thing, that's about as anti-Stoic as you can get. You can't control what already happened. You can't control going. ahead. And relationships
Right.
often recycle arguments, recycle events, recycle, and that's just unhealthy. And everybody knows it, but they still do it. It's one of those things. So you got to
Yeah.
be self-aware enough to say, am I doing what I say I don't do as a Stoic? Do I just keep harping on something that's never going to change because it happened in the past? And am I looking for an opportunity just to one up my partner in some kind of perpetual argument that some
Yeah.
marriage couples go
Yeah.
through their whole existence, which is actually funny in some
Totally.
cases, unless you're a part of it. I don't do that, but I think part of it is just you got to be the one you can control, which is I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to bring up something that made me mad 5 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, you're totally right. I mean, the one thing for sure is the cultivation of yourself. This is always something that we keep coming back to. And this is where people think it's a man on an island thing, which it isn't. But you should be cultivating yourself better. And my personal belief is that it should include stuff that you do that maybe isn't with your partner. Because honestly, like you can't spend I don't think you can do everything together with somebody like that without something happening. On the flip
yeah.
side,
And
I
then
think
you
as
cut yourself
well.
off from everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. But as well, like I think it's important and something that I'm known for within my friends group is just being very introspective and saying like, what did I do? Like I can't. Not everything is my fault, but what can I do to be better for myself or my future partner, for someone else in my life, for my friends, right? Like I'm able to ask that of myself. I think everybody should be doing that. I mean, and I think that's part of the relationship thing. Good relationships, family, friend, romantic, colleague. It's built on people not screwing up. It's built on people doing the hard work, having the courage to step up and say, "Look, I screwed that up, and I got to do better next time." And doing that, right? And doing that step up and doing that work. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about accepting what is and isn't happening or happened, and then making a choice. And I think we see that in so much of ourselves with this, right? Like as much as anger is a madness, and we don't want to get and we don't want it to happen, like Seneca would say, unfortunately, it's one of the emotions. It's one of the things we're going to experience. You just don't let it control yourself, right? And that's really the key thing there. Well, this is a topic we could go on for a long time.
We'll
But
revisit. I'm sure we'll
yeah,
revisit.
absolutely. So, but appreciate everyone's listening today and patience. Do you have any closing thoughts for us today, Mick?
Because you brought up friend of the podcast with Donald Robertson. Um, Ryan Holiday is also writing a new book. I should really ask him if he wants us to say what it's about.
Yeah, but you and I both had some texts with Ryan Holiday
Yeah,
recently.
yeah. I talked to my son, who is a former recon Marine and airborne Ranger infantry officer. So that might give you an idea about what he's writing on. But let's text him and see if he wouldn't mind us telling
Okay,
our
let
audience
it slide.
what it's about, because it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah,
I don't know why
absolutely,
it wouldn't, but
for sure. Well, I will close with something that Stephen Fry used to say on QI whenever he finished his episodes, which was, "Please go out there and be utterly wonderful to each other." But Mick, have a good one today. Thanks for the talk, and we will see everybody on the next episode. Cheers, Mick.
Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the Pup and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pupandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pupandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pup and Porch out.